You walked into the grocery store last week and spent more than you planned. Same cart, similar brands, nearly the exact list you always buy. Yet the total at checkout keeps climbing. 5 years ago, that exact trip cost noticeably less. Filling up your gas tank, eating out on a Friday night, paying your rent, securing car insurance, and even a routine doctor's trip all cost less. It is not your imagination. Most of the items in your budget cost more now than they did half a decade ago, and for most people, paychecks have failed to keep pace. The foundational cost of daily life shifted upward, even as your personal habits remained identical. The core conflict is a widening mathematical gap. While paychecks grow at a modest pace, the actual cost of survival accelerates, pulling further away. Comparing my bank statements from 5 years ago to today, my monthly spending jumped by hundreds of dollars. I live in the same apartment and the same neighborhood. My daily habits are identical. I absorbed a growing monthly deficit without adding any new luxuries or moving to a more expensive city. This reveals a systemic mystery. Entirely unrelated industries, from groceries to auto insurance, became significantly more expensive at roughly the same time. Surviving this environment requires investigating where your personal funds are leaking right now before you are forced to make drastic lifestyle sacrifices. Understanding the macroeconomy is vital, but you can take a defensive financial action right now. Pull out your phone and isolate every recurring monthly digital charge you have. This includes streaming services, apps, memberships, software, meal kits, and cloud storage. Digital services often employ the quiet hike, raising subscription prices in small, incremental steps over several years. These small changes compound. If you haven't used a service in 30 days, you are looking at wasted capital, paying a premium rate for zero current value. For services you still use, check for lower-tier options. You can often downgrade an over-provisioned account without losing the features you actually need. Reclaiming this leaked money restores your monthly cash flow immediately. It provides a hedge against inflation without requiring you to change your daily routine. Optimizing digital subscriptions is a necessary start, but the pressure extends into the physical world through categories that are impossible to avoid. Groceries, housing, the auto market, and healthcare have all spiked simultaneously. When mandatory categories rise at once, they crowd out everything else. Expanding essential costs shrink the space reserved for savings. For anyone with little financial margin, this pressure eventually splinters the budget. The rising floor of essential costs breaks your fixed income ceiling. Standard budgeting advice often fails in this scenario because the baseline cost of survival has permanently risen. A chain reaction of colliding global forces drove this spike. First, an immense volume of newly created money surged rapidly through the entire economy in a highly compressed time frame. Second, global supply chains faced severe strain and delayed recovery, making it harder and more expensive to move goods. Third, energy and transportation costs rose, increasing the foundational price of doing business. Rising costs for raw materials, shipping, and labor compound at every stage of production. By the retail shelf, that accumulated expense lands directly on the consumer. These elevated operational costs are now locked in. Consumer prices are unlikely to return to their previous levels. You do not need a degree in global economics to navigate this permanent shift. Waiting for prices to return to where they were 5 years ago ignores the current reality. Protecting your financial health requires a proactive approach to how you allocate every dollar in today's economy. You fill your grocery cart with the exact items you bought a year ago, but when you reach the register, your budget hits a wall. Everything costs more. This happens because of a strict mathematical reality. Prices rise when a growing pool of money chases a shrinking supply of goods and services. That sudden squeeze at the checkout reflects the final stage of a systemic mathematical shift working its way through the entire economy. To see how this works, imagine a small town with 100 people and a bakery that produces exactly 100 loaves of bread. At this equilibrium, each loaf costs $1. Then the environment changes. The townspeople suddenly find themselves with extra cash to spend. At the same time, delayed supplies mean the bakery can only produce 80 loaves of bread. More dollars are now competing for fewer loaves. To restore balance to the market, the price of the bread must rise. Whenever the total volume of circulating money outweighs the physical reality of available goods, prices are forced upward by mathematical necessity. That bakery scenario reflects the reality of the global economy over the last few years, just on a much larger scale. For a long period, an enormous volume of new money flowed into the pockets of consumers and businesses across every sector. But as that spending surged, the global systems responsible for manufacturing and delivering products strained and locked up under the pressure. Systemic scarcity was created because this bakery phenomenon occurred across thousands of different industries simultaneously. The strain on the supply chain triggered a secondary problem. The actual cost of keeping a business running began to multiply. This chart shows rising operational costs. Energy, transportation, and labor experienced steep, simultaneous spikes. To survive mounting expenses, businesses merged those three pillars into a higher final price tag, transferred directly to you. While many companies only raised prices to cover their new overhead, others took advantage of the environment to hike prices aggressively and expand their own profit margins. Every retail price tag serves as the final accounting for the delays and rising costs buried deep in the supply chain. All of those macro-level pipeline failures eventually land right on your kitchen table, tearing into your monthly budget. Your paycheck might look the same as it did 2 years ago, but the math required to cover your rent and groceries no longer works. This invisible drain is called a loss of purchasing power. Purchasing power describes the actual volume of goods a single unit of currency can acquire. Right now, each of your dollars simply buys a little less than it used to. Because the currency itself has lost capacity, earning the same salary year over year is effectively taking a pay cut. This graph illustrates a harsh economic reality. While inflation might slow down, those elevated prices rarely reverse course, instead plateauing at a new, higher baseline. Hoping the system will magically reset to the old normal is a mistake. Waiting out the storm guarantees your wealth will continue to erode. You cannot control the global supply chain, but by understanding the mechanics draining your wallet, you can start taking the defensive, strategic steps necessary to protect your money. Strained supply chains and surging energy costs created a bottleneck that swept across the globe, driving up the cost to produce and transport nearly everything. That massive macroeconomic pressure did not stay at the shipping ports. It landed directly on your personal budget, showing up in higher grocery receipts, gas prices, and utility bills all at the exact same time. When faced with a sudden, overwhelming financial squeeze, our very first instinct is to react quickly to protect ourselves. But those natural survival reflexes often lead us to make choices that actually worsen our financial position. This does not happen because people are bad with money. It happens because the immediate solutions that feel highly responsible in the short term rely on deeply flawed math. To survive an inflation spike, you have to actively identify these instinctual reflexes and override them before they cause permanent damage to your wealth. Mistake number 1 is the immediate impulse to trade down to the absolute cheapest version of every product and service available. This side-by-side bar chart shows the actual cost of cheap goods over time. A durable item requires more cash up front, but buying a heavily discounted alternative that falls apart means you pay for it repeatedly. Over a multi-year timeline, the cheap replacement cycle costs you significantly more. You see this wasted capital everywhere. The bargain phone plan costs you in missed calls. The absolute cheapest cut of meat becomes a total loss when nobody actually eats it. Moving to a lower price tier is only a viable strategy if you rigorously evaluate the actual utility you retain. Trading down blindly guarantees waste. Mistake number 2 is attempting to bridge the gap between rising daily costs and a stagnant income by using credit cards. When the numbers do not line up at the end of the month, it is incredibly tempting to put recurring, unavoidable bills like gas and electricity on a card, operating under the assumption that you will somehow catch up next month. This visualization of compound interest illustrates the specific danger of that assumption. Compound interest is when you pay interest not only on your initial purchase, but on the accumulated interest from previous months. By charging daily expenses, high interest rates attach to the balance, expanding a temporary cash shortfall into a rapidly compounding liability. Attempting to mask the pain of inflation through universal cheapness and credit cards does not solve the problem. It converts a temporary cash flow squeeze into a permanent structural deficit. Mistake number 3 involves canceling protective expenses and preventative maintenance to free up immediate cash. Keeping an extra $100 in your checking account by skipping an oil change or dropping an insurance premium creates the illusion of savings. In reality, it leaves you completely exposed to a catastrophic future liability, like a major engine repair or an uncovered medical bill. Mistake number 4 is operating under the expectation that high prices are a temporary anomaly and waiting for them to revert to their previous baseline. This line graph maps price inflation over a typical economic cycle. The rate of inflation may slow down, meaning prices stop climbing so quickly, but the actual cost rarely drops back to the original starting point. Instead, prices reach a sustained horizontal plateau. By keeping your budget pinned to historical prices, you lock yourself into a persistent, unbridgeable gap. Delaying your financial adjustments, whether you are deferring physical car maintenance or waiting for a macroeconomic price drop, drastically amplifies your personal financial risk. All of these physical missteps are driven by a single psychological root. Mistake number 5. This is the mental trap of the old scoreboard. It happens when you measure your current living costs strictly against what you paid for those exact same items 5 years ago. This constant, backward-looking comparison traps you in a continuous loop of frustration. You are trying to win a game where the rules and the numbers have already changed. Escaping this feeling of stagnation requires completely abandoning those historical price comparisons. You have to accept the current market numbers as your permanent, immovable baseline. When you are actively facing financial stress, every single one of these 5 choices feels entirely reasonable. But simply recognizing the invisible mechanics of these traps is your first step to consciously sidestepping them. Gaining ground requires building a new, forward-looking financial strategy that is formulated entirely around today's unchangeable pricing realities. To achieve that, we are going to use this 3-tiered action framework. It breaks down the specific tactical steps you need to execute today, this week, and this month to regain control over your household cash flow. Thriving in a higher-cost world is not a matter of waiting for external economic relief. It is a matter of actively resetting your internal financial strategy today. You understand why prices went up, and you likely feel the weight of those rising costs pressing down on your monthly budget. But it is time to take a breath. We are going to map out exactly how to handle it. These are specific, practical steps you can start taking today, implement throughout this week, and finalize by the end of the month. Executing these steps moves your budget from a state of constant stress into a system that actually functions in a higher cost world. Step 1 starts at the grocery store. Food prices have climbed, but this is also the category where you have the most immediate daily control over what you spent. Instead of trying to change your entire shopping list at once, start by testing lower cost options on just your staple items. Try store brands for staples like rice, pasta, canned goods, and cleaning supplies. In many cases, the price difference is meaningful, even if the quality difference is small. Next, spend exactly 10 minutes before your shopping trip deciding what you are eating for the week. You then buy only what is on that list, which cuts out impulse purchases. Sticking to a meal plan also tackles one of the biggest hidden costs in any household: food waste. When every item in your cart has a specific purpose, you stop throwing away spoiled ingredients at the end of the week. Step 2 is taking a look at your insurance. Many of us fall into the trap of paying the exact same car or renter's premium year after year, simply out of habit. Spend 30 minutes getting quotes from 2 or 3 other providers. You do not have to switch, but if you find a better rate, call your current provider and ask if they can review your policy or adjust your coverage to match. Optimizing these 2 areas recovers monthly cash flow, providing immediate relief to your budget, using the same services you already pay for. Step 3 addresses where you keep your money. If your cash is sitting in a standard savings account, it is earning almost nothing while the cost of living continues to climb. This chart shows how your money behaves in different environments. On the left, a standard savings balance loses its purchasing power as inflation rises. Moving your money to a high-yield savings account, shown on the right, slows the devaluation of your cash by capturing a higher interest rate than a standard account. Step 4 brings us back to your house. Utility bills have crept up alongside everything else, and most households simply absorb the higher cost without making adjustments. You can lower these passive costs with a few simple physical adjustments. use energy-efficient bulbs, set a programmable thermostat, wash laundry in cold water, and seal drafts around windows. None of these changes cost much upfront, but reducing home utilities while protecting your savings provides tangible breathing room in your monthly accounts. Step 5 is about protecting your progress. Set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to your savings on the same day your paycheck arrives. Moving the money before it can be seen or spent helps you adjust to living on the remainder, making saving a default action rather than a monthly decision. This diagram illustrates Step 6, the 30-day tracking rule. Pick the 3 categories where your money seems to disappear the fastest. For most, that is food, transportation, and discretionary spending. As you track every dollar for a month, you will see where that discretionary spending starts to overflow. Tracking just these 3 categories ensures you will spot at least one area where you are spending more than you realized. That gives you an exact target for a budget cut. Combining automated transfers with targeted tracking creates a system that protects your money and keeps you aware of where it is going. Cutting costs is effective, but eventually your savings growth hits a mathematical limit. You can only reduce expenses so far. To break through that limit and keep up with a higher cost world, you must increase the amount of money coming in. Start by looking at your current job. Research salary ranges for similar roles in your industry and decide if it makes sense to ask for a raise or explore other options. If a raise is not realistic right now, look for a side gig that fits your schedule or monetize a skill you already have, like tutoring, freelancing, or making something people want to buy. Compounding even a modest income boost on top of these expense reductions changes your long-term financial trajectory. Here is the bottom line. Prices went up. They may stay higher than they used to be, but that does not mean your finances have to shrink with them. These 7 steps do not require complex financial engineering. They simply require a small commitment of your time and a deliberate intention to manage where your money goes. If this helped you make sense of why your money feels tighter, tap the like button so more people can find it. If someone you know has been feeling squeezed by rising costs, send this to them and comment below with your biggest price jump. I post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.